Tvoja je snaga što čini kroz nas. Tobom smo jaki jer silan si ti. Slava je naša u poslušnosti. Ti si naš pravi i svemoćni Bog, izvor spasenja sveg naroda svog. Zato ne nama ni hvalu ni sjaj, nego svu slavu svom imenu daj.
Chapter 15, verse 21, Mark 15:21. Then they compelled a certain man, Simon a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus, as he was coming out of the country and passing by, to bear his cross. And now let us have prayer. Dear Lord, thank you for this beautiful Sabbath day. Thank you for this opportunity we have to bear your word, hear your word during this time of isolation. I ask that you open our hearts to the message we are about to hear. Please continue to bless Pastor Zoran as he delivers the message you have inspired him to tell us. I ask in your Son Jesus' name, amen.
Ovo pak velim, koji s tvrđom seje, s tvrđom će i požnjeti, a koji blagoslov seje, blagoslov će i požnjeti. 2. Korinčanima 9:6. Postoji priča o davanju i primanju. Priča govori o dva zemljana suda. Jedan je bio nov i blistav, a drugi star i napukao. Visili su na krajevima drvenog štapa koji je čovjek nosio na ramenima. Svakoga dana bi uzimao vodu sa izvora i pešačio stazom do kuće. Kada je stizao kući, novi sud je bio pun vode koji se potom koristila za kupanje i čišćenje. Drugi sud je bio skoro prazan, pa ipak na onom delu staze iznad kojeg je visio stari sud dok je čovjek vraćao doma, stava je divan red cvijeća koje je niklo zahvaljujući svakodnevnom zalivanju iz napuklog suda. Ova priča pokazuje lepotu davanja.
This talks about giving and how God has blessed us to give that which we have.
In the Russian village of Nemirov, villagers believed that their rabbi every Friday morning vanished. He was nowhere to be found, not in the synagogue, not in the library, nor in the park. However, at the evening service, at a Sabbath welcoming service, his face radiated heavenly peace. They say the rabbi, blessed be God, ascends to heaven every Friday morning where he talks with God. There was a skeptical, disbelieving man in the village who questioned their explanation. Ascends to heaven? Nonsense. I will solve this mystery once and for all. So, the disbelieving man decided to follow the rabbi. As usual, early in the morning, the rabbi rose, said his prayers. Before he left the house, an axe and a thick piece of rope, and he went away from the village. The rabbi headed into thick woods and began to chop down a tree. He made a large bundle with his rope. He put the large bundle of wood onto his back and headed towards the end of the woods. Near the edge of the village stood a little house, barely room enough for two. Inside dwelt an old woman, widow, and her sick son. The rabbi left the wood near the door. He prayed for the widow and her son and left. The disbelieving man became the rabbi's friend and even his disciple. He went to his synagogue every Friday evening and came to his house every week so he could learn about God and his holy word. Now, whenever any of the villagers say that our rabbi ascends all the way to heaven on Friday mornings, the man quietly adds, if not higher, if not higher. The holy is heaven, says Rabbi Schneur. The holy of holy is when heaven is brought down to earth. In Judaism, there is one thing even higher than heaven, bringing it down to earth. Showing compassion or doing acts of kindness is bringing heaven down to earth. Compassion is a virtue that is divine in origin. Compassion extended always invites divine intervention. We read in Psalm 41, verse 1 to 3, there is a special blessing extended to those that extend compassion. Blessed is he who considers the poor. The Lord will deliver him in the time of trouble. The Lord will preserve him and keep him alive, and he will be blessed on the earth. You will not deliver him to the will of his enemies. The Lord will strengthen him on his bed of illness. You will sustain him on his sickbed. Compassion extended always invites divine intervention of Jehovah Rapha, the Lord who heals. God is known by many names in the Bible. Each name reveals a certain aspect of his character. Jehovah Rapha is one such name found in the Old Testament and means the God who heals. The first time when Jehovah Rapha, or the Lord who heals, name is mentioned is in Exodus chapter 15, from verse 24 to verse 27. God reveals himself with Jehovah Rapha to Israelites after the exodus out of Egypt. After 3 days of wandering in the desert of Shur, the Israelites were in desperate need of water. They were thirsty. They discovered a river. However, the waters were unfit to drink. As a reflection of the quality of the water and their emotional disposition, the Israelites named the river Mara, bitter. God healed waters by instructing Moses to throw a piece of the wood into water, thereby making it drinkable. He healed water. Following this miracle, God declared himself as Jehovah Rapha to his people by proclaiming, "If you listen carefully to the Lord your God and do what is right in his eyes, if you pay attention to his commandments and keep all his decrees, I will not bring on you any of the diseases I brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you." In the next chapter, God is teaching Israel to keep the Sabbath holy. This particular promise was placed in the context when Israelites left Egypt, and then Moses is singing his song, his praises to the Lord. The Lord is my strength and song, and he has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him. Miriam as well, she sings the praises. Moses is reflecting to God, who is God of salvation, but also God of creation. The God who brought dry land out of the sea, the same as happened in the Genesis, when he brought a dry land out of the sea. God of creation. And then the next chapter, chapter 16, is a reference to God who is giving bread from heaven, manna. And there is something else, a behavior that God wants to teach them is to keep the Sabbath holy. So in this next chapter, God is teaching Israel to remember the Sabbath. He is preparing them to enter the holy time even before was a holy space, sanctuary or temple established. The Sabbath is more than just a space, a church building. God is calling us to enter into His community in time. It is now when our churches are closed, when we are missing to meet in space. Jehovah Rapha, the Lord who heals, is expecting us to be a community in time, to meet in holy time. It is my prayer as we enter the temple in time and become community in time to show kindness to those in need, those around us. And may we find assurance and hope in His promise. If you diligently heed the voice of the Lord, your God, and do what is right in His sight, give ear to His commandments, and keep all His statutes, I will put none of the diseases on you which I have brought on the Egyptians, for I am the Lord who heals you. I am Jehovah Rapha.
Birdie's bike ride. For his birthday, Birdie got a brand new bicycle. He was so happy. He spent all day riding his bike around the house. Finally, his dad asked him to ride the bike elsewhere. "I know you're having fun," said Dad, "but your mom is scared because she feels you're going to run her over, and you're making stripes in the grass." "Okay, Dad, I'll go ride my bike somewhere else." Birdie rode his bike across the road and into the paddocks next door. It was a wide, flat field with hardly any bumps, so Birdie could ride even faster and further than before. When he came to the end of the pasture, he discovered a muddy creek, and there was frogs there. "Ribbit, ribbit," said the frogs. "Hello, Birdie." "Hey, frogs, look at my new bike." "Oh, it's so nice," said the frogs. "Is it one of those bikes that can fly?" "Oh, to fly?" said Birdie. "Oh, I don't think so." "Ribbit, ribbit. We think it looks like one that could fly. Why don't you try and you could see?" "How would I test this?" he asked. The frogs talked among themselves for a moment. "Ribbit, ribbit. Just ride up to the edge of the stream and fly across to the other side," they said. "We can cheer you on as you fly over our heads." "That's a good idea," said Birdie. Birdie was riding his bike across the pasture and then started to pedal as fast as he could so that the bike was just gunning it towards the creek until he flew into the air. "This is a flying bike," he yelled. "Look at me. I'm flying, I'm flying." But the bike didn't fly very far. He didn't fly for too long. In 2 seconds, it changed direction and fell straight into the mud. Splat went Birdie. The frogs quickly jumped into the mud. "Ribbit, ribbit. Maybe you didn't cycle fast enough downhill. Let's admit, this was not a flying bike, said Bertie. I shouldn't have listened to you. Bertie dragged his bike out of the mud and rode it home. The mud spattered off the wheels, and he was getting stuck while he pedaled. My poor bike, said Bertie. It will take me ages to get it clean again. I should never, never, never have listened to these foolish frogs. When he got home, Bertie's father could not stop laughing. Bertie looked so funny to him. He got the hose and said, "Now stand still. This will be cold and unpleasant, but it's the quickest way to get you and your bike clean." Bertie stood on the lawn while his father squirted water all over him, and soon all the mud was washed away and he was clean. "Where did you get this idea?" his dad asked him. The frogs told me to do it. The frogs are always making such bad ideas. If you listen to what they're saying, then you can only expect bad things to happen. I shouldn't have listened, Bertie said sadly. This is reminding me of a Bible verse. He who walks with wise men will be wise, but the companion of fools will be destroyed. Proverbs 13, verse 20. In other words, you will be like the people you hang out with. If you're hanging out with the bad frogs, then you might get characteristics that are just like them. I understand. If I want to be wise, then I have to hang out with the wise ones. Exactly, said his dad. From then on, whenever Bertie would ride his bike through the pasture, he would just say hello to the frogs, and that was it. Before they could croak and fill his head with bad ideas, he would be long gone on his bike as fast as he possibly could.
Dragi naši, šaljem vam srdačan pozdrav iz crkve u Torontu. Drago mi je što ove subote možemo i na ovaj način biti zajedno, da otvaramo Božju reč i da se i ove subote učimo iz nje. Ove subote selimo se na samom početku, otprilike 2000 godina unazad. Selimo se u Pilatovu sudnicu. Ja znam da ste dobro upoznati sa događajima koje su bile u Pilatovoj sudnici. Vi znate, u jednom momentu Pilat predlaže narodu da izaberu koga će osloboditi, da li Isusa ili Varavu ili Barabu, pošto je bio običaj na praznik da Pilat pusti nekoga. I narod tada jednoglasno, i to je tužno toga petka, traže da se pusti Varava, a da se Hristos osudi. I Pilat je tako i postupio i tada Isus uzima onaj krst koji je bio pripremljen za Varavu, on uzima taj krst. Odnosno Isus, vi znate iz istorije, Isus je verovatno uzeo onaj poprečni deo krsta, patibulum, koji je bio isto tako težak, ali cijeli krst bi bilo jako teško poneti. Onaj vertikalni deo je uvek bio na mestu raspeća. I Isus tada kreće ka Golgoti i ono što znamo iz Evanđelja, sa njim su pošli i druga dva razbojnika. Velika je gužva na ulici. To je put Via Dolorosa. Ako ste imali prilike da posetite prostor Izraela, onda i danas vi možete proći tim putem Via Dolorosa ili putem bola kojim Isus išao. Pre 2000 godina toga petka je bila tako velika gužva na tom putu da vojnici moraju kopljima da se probijaju kroz onu masu da bi ovi osuđenici stigli do mesta Golgote. I ono što znamo iz Evanđelja, da Isus više puta pada pod tim krstom. Hristos ne može da ponese taj krst. Razbojnici mogu. Tu još dva razbojnika, ali oni mogu. Ali Isus ne može. Uzmite u obzir da Isus, ako se vratite u četvrtak uveče, Hristos je uhapšen u Gecimanskom vrtu. Hristos je te noći doživeo suđenje. On ništa nije jeo, nije spavao, nije pio. U petak ujutru je kod Pilata. Bičevan je i to 2 puta. I tada dobija krst, odnosno patibulum. I jednostavno Hristovo telo nije moglo da izdrži teret toga krsta. I Hristos nekoliko puta na tom putu Via Dolorosa pada pod tim teretom. I to je problem. Problem je što nema nikoga da ponese krst. I sad u onoj masi vojnici kopljima se probijaju kroz onu masu. Toliko ljudi. Kaže se po nekim proračunima bilo je i 1 milion ljudi u Jerusalimu kada je bila Pasha. Ja se pitam, gde su učenici tog petka? Zar nema neko od učenika da mu pomogne da ponese?
A single disciple to help him carry the burden of the cross.
Gde su svi oni koji Isus izlečio?
Where were all the ones that Jesus healed? When we read, we know that there are so many that Jesus had helped. Why in all the Mass was there not a single person that says, you healed me, let me carry this for you? And where are the ones that Jesus fed? In the writings of the Bible, we know there was thousands that Jesus fed. Not one would say, I will carry this cross. I see it's heavy. In the Gospels, we don't have such an account. There was 1 million people there. There was 1 million people there, but not a single good man. A commentator said, I met many people, but not a good man. There isn't a person to approach Christ. The soldiers are in a problem because the cross has to make its way to Golgotha. But Jesus cannot. The soldiers do not want to. The Roman soldiers, this is quite below them. And the Jews, not only do they not want to, but they cannot. It was a Jewish custom and belief that if you come into contact with the blood of the person who is accused, you will be unclean to participate in the customs of Passover. We know that as Jesus carried the cross, he had already been whipped and that the wood was already covered in his blood. So whoever touched it was definitely going to become unclean for Passover. The soldiers don't want to, the Jews cannot, and no one wants to approach. And then we come to the key text for this morning's sermon. We will find it in Mark 15, verse 21. Again, Mark 15, verse 21. It says, "Then they compelled a certain man, Simon, a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus, as he was coming out of the country and passing by, to bear the cross." A man named Simon was the one who carried the cross. This Simon, he was coming from the outside into Jerusalem, and they're going from Jerusalem out towards Golgotha. The time is in between 8 and 9 a.m. What is Simon doing? Why is he entering? Most likely, he came for a worship or a ceremony to do with Passover. He was probably spending the nights somewhere outside of Jerusalem because Jerusalem was overwhelmed with people and not everyone could reside through the holiday time inside the city. So in between 8 and 9 in the morning, he is entering Jerusalem with this want to worship, and he's confronted with this mob and group of people. This is interesting to me, not just this situation, but many situations in the Bible. We see God's hand working, that this man is entering just as they're leaving, and they come into contact with each other. Let's be reminded of a few more situations where Jesus meets people. When the mother lost her only son, how is it that this group of people passed just as Jesus was coming? And Jesus makes this a situation of gladness and not sadness. When you have Joseph, who they threw him in the well or hole, and the Ishmaelites are passing at that same time, and the brothers get an idea to sell Joseph. When did the Ishmaelites leave so that they could, at that perfect moment, be by that hole so that they could buy Joseph, so that everything that needed to happen actually took place? The providence of God is just overwhelming our steps, how our steps are led. So Simon is entering the city, and he is confronted with this large group of people exiting Jerusalem. And what is interesting when you think of this 21st verse, why was it him specifically that carried the cross? He wasn't a part of the group. He wasn't even a part of the masses that were watching. He was just entering. Why him specifically? I would like to share something with you from the Desire of Ages, page 325. It says, "At this time, a stranger, Simon, a Cyrenian, coming in from the country, meets the throng. He hears the taunts and ribaldry of the crowd. He hears the words contemptuously repeated, 'Make way for the King of the Jews.' He stops in astonishment at the scene, and as he expresses his compassion, they seize him and place the cross upon his shoulders.
Ajmo još jednom
Let's read this last part again.
Zastao je čudeći se.
He stops in astonishment at the scene, and as he expresses his compassion, they seize him and place the cross upon his shoulders.
Imate s jedne strane masu.
On one side you have the throng, on the other side you have Simon. They're making fun of Jesus, why he can't pick up this heavy cross, why is he falling under the burden? And Simon approaches and hears it, but he's not a part of this throng. He came from the outside. And we could do a whole sermon just on this, how problematic it is to be a part of the throng, and how different it is when you're outside the throng or the mass of people. As one commentator says, when you're outside of the throng, we see things clearer. And Simon, who is outside of this group, he sees things completely differently, and he expresses compassion. While we're talking about him, why don't we try to put ourselves into his shoes or sandals? This was probably the worst day of his life. He carried the cross. But when you take the Bible, it says that they forced him to take the cross. It wasn't a voluntary thing. He was forced because he expressed compassion. Simon had heard sermons, and he was a little bit in awe, but he wasn't a disciple. He would have never thought to carry the cross, and maybe it seems to be the worst day of his life. Why? Because it mentions that they forced him, and that's a very strong Greek word that is used. What we know about him is that he's a Cyrenian. We don't have many verses about him, but we know that he's a Cyrenian, a foreigner. He's a Jew, but he is a foreigner. Where is the place he was from in comparison to the locations now? It would be located in current Libya. What we know from history was that there was a very large colony of Jewish people settled there. We know that because of war and historically through the Old Testament, we know that Jews were spread across the land. They had one goal: to, at least one time in their lives, reach Jerusalem. At least for one of the 3 holidays, to make their way to Jerusalem. Passover and Yom Kippur. For Passover, that was the busiest time. Out of the 3 holidays, Passover was the largest. So for the Cyrenians, maybe some of them never even made their way to Jerusalem. But it was a yearning and a wish to make it there one day. They didn't have postcards. They don't have photos to see the promised land. I haven't personally been. Maybe one day I will go, maybe I won't. But you can go on YouTube and you could see Israel. You could see postcards, you could see pictures. In that time, they don't have any of that. And the yearning is constantly there to touch that land, because they just hear stories of how beautiful it is to be near the River of Galilee, Mount of Olives, how wonderful it would be to walk where Abraham walked, and King David as well. When you think of Simon, the Cyrenian, maybe he came here for the very first time for Passover with his whole family. What a big moment. Some statistics say that the journey was some 2,000 kilometers. If they went by sea, if they went by land, it would be even more. Several weeks of journey, and very expensive and dangerous. The ships of that time weren't like they are now. Paul says that the ship would break 3 times in one journey. And then taking a ship and then on foot with bandits around and wild animals. Some never even made it. And here Simon is, and he actually made it with his family, and he's walking these paths that Abraham walked, and he is now going to participate in Passover. He's going to worship, and his heart, maybe it was beating hard because he was excited, because he might even make it into the temple. But then he meets the throng. Maybe, that's why I say maybe the worst day, because he was forced then to carry the cross, and he now knows that he won't be able to participate in the Passover feasts and traditions, and this is the only reason he came here. Then that question, why? Why me? Instead of making it to worship, he is ending his journey in Golgotha as he carries the cross, thinking, why me? But he got the cross because he showed compassion. No one wants to carry it, but they see in his face that he showed compassion, and that was a sign. There, this is who will carry the cross. Empathy and compassion. The face is very telling. Your face will show what you are feeling, and he felt sadness for this whole situation of mocking and a man falling under the cross. It was very clear that his emotions showed on his face. It says that even with Cain, that his face changed. The hate showed on Cain's face, whereas on Simon's face we saw empathy and compassion on the face. And when we talk about the face, a commentator says it's very important to carry a small mirror to see our reflection. Does my face show hate, or does my face show empathy and compassion? The look on his face showed what he felt, and instead of ending in the temple, he ended up in Golgotha. A very unexpected turn of events. There's a story that's been made up in this context. A Christian was heading to worship, to church, and on the road, he meets his neighbor. And the neighbor says, and he says, where are you going? And he says, oh, I've been going to the pharmacies looking for a pill. And he says, I know you have this pill. Can I have it? And the Christian says, you know, I can't return home because I won't make it to church on time. I'll be late. But when I return in the afternoon, I will bring it by. As he's entering the church, Jesus is exiting. And he says, but Jesus, where are you going? I'm just coming in for service. And Jesus says, I'm going to give a man some medicine. Empathy. Showing compassion and having empathy is extremely important. This empathy took him to a great place, and we'll talk about this in a little bit. Christ showed empathy and compassion. As the Gospels tell us, looking at the people, Jesus felt empathy because they were like sheep without a shepherd. We don't know Jesus' face, but we know what that would have looked like. Simon, because of his compassion, ends up at Golgotha. I'm sure that thought, why me? Why me? I've come all this way. And instead of participating Passover, I have to carry this cross. And he arrives to Golgotha, not just him with his cross, but Christ as well. The soldiers and the other prisoners. I know many of you know what happened at Golgotha. It has a different word that almost like a skull, because it was probably in the shape of a skull, and they seem to know that where Golgotha is situated. At Golgotha, there was many groups of people. There was the Pharisees, Sadducees, the soldiers, the people, and Jesus' mother, and John, the disciple. When you think of these people, how must they have felt standing there at Golgotha when Jesus said, "It is finished"? And when you're understanding the Gospels and everything that happened in that time, the earth shook, there was an earthquake, cliffs broke, thunder. It was such black, deep darkness that they couldn't find their way home. And great fear entered these people as all of this was happening. And then John, in his sadness, and Mary is in sadness because her son has just been killed. People living in fear in that moment, that the Roman captain said, "This is truly the Son of God." And you know, the Romans were crucifying many people, and this never happened. They could see a difference. What we know in the Gospels is that when they were going home, that they were beating their chests because of the anguish they felt, because they felt bad for crucifying Jesus. You have a sad mother, people in fear, people with their conscience heavy. The only person who was happy on Golgotha was Simon the Cyrenian. The only person who was happy that they carried the cross, for who was believed the Son of God. Read The Desire of Ages and read the chapter called Golgotha. That chapter, when you're reading the Bible and this alongside it, it will change your life. When people were looking up at Jesus' face, they were sure of his divinity as he hung there on the cross. And now Simon, who this day that turned from being the worst day to the best day, because now he knows who he carried the cross for, that he carried the cross for God's Son, that when he let go of his last breath, there was earthquakes, darkness, thunder. There is no happier person standing below the cross than Simon the Cyrenian. His sadness turned into joy. Why did he have to experience this joy? Because he expressed compassion. He expressed empathy. Jesus' empathy and compassion ended up with him being on Golgotha, as did Simon the Cyrenian. And our own empathy and compassion will take us to Golgotha. The question for us this morning is, do we have compassion? Do we feel empathy? When we think about today's situation, today we're in the midst of a pandemic, a great fear. Do we have compassion? We talk more about hygiene and isolation, and so much less about being a good person during a pandemic. There's so many people in Jerusalem that day, but where was that solid person who would carry the cross? The need for survival should never quench empathy and compassion towards someone else. We love life, and no one wants to end their life, and death is foreign. But that cannot manifest itself to me being negligent of other people. Compassion and empathy has to exist. When the epidemic started in China, how did you feel? Did you feel sad for the people, or did you say, that's far away? But then it got closer. What was our first instinct? Was it just to survive? You know, when you think of it, they're going to discuss this for a long time and how it took place and people's reactions. Initially, it seemed like every man for himself, emptying out the stores. Every European, the European Union, the U.S., everyone just shut down. Everyone was just in fear. Our reactions we should study for a very long time, because solid people with empathy and compassion were lacking. A Christian needs to be above this. I got a message from young people that asked, do any of our elderly need shopping trips or have any needs that we could meet? And I'm reading this and saying, thank God, we have people who are compassionate enough, who want to help in this time. So, as important as hygiene is and isolation is, it's also important to call our brothers and sisters, are they healthy and do they need help? Because that is our path towards Golgotha. And this is what brought Simon there. When you think of him, Simon spent all his life grateful and thankful for that moment. As he's entering, they are exiting the city, and now he knows that this is God's providence. And he is grateful that God led him so that he could carry Jesus' cross. So what we know is he didn't stop carrying Jesus' cross, but just in a different way. When you read Matthew 16, verse 24, and very well-known words of Christ, where he says, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone desires to come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. He says, who wants to follow me has to carry their cross. Simon continued to carry the cross. The compassion of carrying the cross. Carrying the cross has many meanings, but one of them is feeling compassion, feeling empathy with others, because this is what brought Jesus to Golgotha. Jesus' love towards everyone. And when you think of Simon, the carrying of the cross, later in his life, this had a great impact on him and his family. And when we return to the text of Mark 15:21, Simon, a Cyrenian, the father of Alexander and Rufus. It's interesting that they mentioned his children. If they were unknown, their names never would have been mentioned. But because their names are mentioned, it shows us that they were known within the early Christian church. See, his compassion gave positive results. The names are sometimes a bit iffy, but when the same names are mentioned in the Bible, the connections are made. So when you go a little bit later into Acts 19:33 to 34, and they drew Alexander out of the multitude. Alexander and Paul were in Ephesus, Alexander was here. And out of Christian tradition, we know that Alexander and Rufus, with Peter and Paul, were missionaries together. What a great experience for a family. Let's read it together. Simon's wife, for instance. So Romans 16, verse 13. Romans 16, verse 13, and it says, "Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord, and his mother, and mine." And Paul says, for someone who was on a journey with him, "Greet Rufus, chosen in the Lord." She calls his mother, the mother, his mother, because she took such care and showed such compassion towards Paul and his needs that he says she is like my mother. Look at what this empathy, look at the result of someone's empathy showed onto one family. Like their whole family changed by Simon's actions. One of John's disciples says that Rufus was a martyr for Christ. Rufus carried the cross into a martyr death. His love for Christ went that far. What caused all this? One day, their father showed compassion and carried Jesus' cross. He could have said, "Take it off of me, I'm a free man." But he carried it out of compassion and empathy. And I would like to bring this to a close. That which we already said, compassion led Jesus to the Golgotha, and Simon was brought there in the same way. Empathy and compassion will bring us to Golgotha. Don't be impacted by the masses. Don't lose your empathy and compassion. And sometimes being outside of the mass, you could see things much more clear. I would like to finish with a song. I don't know who wrote this poem. It's so beautiful, and it talks about Simon, the Cyrenian. And I'm going to read it to you. The throng started slowly. A wall of soldiers. There's nowhere to go from the three crosses. On everyone's back, a burden of a heavy cross. Something would be weird, but one among them was the one who created the wood and the tree that they carried. No one was defending him. No one was protecting him, as though he was getting a proper punishment. No one to clean his brow. His body had a limit, and he was losing strength. For Christ, even though it was morning, it will be followed by a final night. Everything stops. The heavy cross does not want, no one wants to carry. And it's pushing the body down and pushing on a back that's hurt. The street, everyone is looking upon him and yelling. Yesterday they sang hosannas, but today they're yelling, "Crucify Christ." The soldier is confused. No one wants the cross. From the outside comes a man, a foreigner named Simon, confused, in awe, and sadly looking on. And the soldier knew immediately that this person was the one this man would be the one to carry Christ to his glory.
na dan kad je mene otkupio Bog. Krst svoj nosim sad radosno ja, da na kraju za krunu ga dam. Divna nada mi od njega sjajna livja, da me čeka već Gospod moj sam.
Neka prezreni krst sa Golgote tamo meni sjajan i slavan je sad. Večni svedok je on, da me ljubi moj Bog i u njemu ja vidim svoj narod. Krst svoj nosim sad radosno ja, da na kraju za krunu ga dam. Divna nada mi od njega sjada mi sja, da me čeka već Gospod moj sam.
Grubi Isusov krst zrači nadu i mir, kao sunce svoj nebeski sjaj. A kad vrati se on, silni spasitelj moj, tad sa njime ću poći u raj. Krst svoj nosim sad radosno ja, da na kraju za krunu ga dam. Divna nada mi od njega sjada mi sja, da me čeka već Gospod moj sam.
Oče naš koji si na nebu, hvala ti što si i sažaljenja dao svoga jedinorodnog sina da dođe na ovaj svet i ponese, kao što kažu reči ove pesme, grubi i težak krst. Hvala ti što nas voliš, hvala ti što nas čekaš i što nas trpiš i što želiš da učestvujemo u tvojoj prirodi, da se tvoj lik ponovo obnovi u nama, a između ostalog taj lik podrazumeva da imamo saosjećanje i sažaljivost ka drugim, kao kada si ti gledao ljude da su kao bez pastira, imao si sažaljenje. Pomozi nam da, noseći tvoj krst, gledamo ljude tvojim očima. I sada kada je veliki strah i ljudi žele da prvo bezbede sebe da prežive, ti, Gospode, učini da mi kao hrišćani, kao tvoj narod, budemo izdignuti svega toga, da upravo sada pokažemo vrednost i važnost tvoga krsta koje je sadržan u dobrim delima. Blagoslovi nas i pomozi nam u tome, a ovo te molim u Hristovo ime. Amin.